Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for a very special edition of What's Buzzin' at Georgia Tech, our new webinar series. My name is Laci Weeden. I'm the Director of Parent-Friendly Programs at Georgia Tech. I've been at Georgia Tech for 6 years. I've worked with parents in a college setting for over 11 years, and I've been in higher education for 25 years. So definitely love working with our students and our families. Today I'm joined by author Marjorie Savage, author of the book, You're on Your Own, but I'm Here If You Need Me, Mentoring Your Child Through the College Years, and her book. Many of you, we posted this on Facebook and through different information, is on Amazon now. This is her 3rd edition. But thank you, Marjorie, for joining us. Marjorie is a education specialist at the University of Minnesota's Department of Family and Social Science. She's worked with college parents and families for more than 25 years and has been recognized nationally and internationally for writing, speaking, and research on the relationships between students and families during the college years. I know myself, I have used a lot of her research over the years, and I'm very thankful to her for all the work that she has done. Thank you today for joining us, Marjorie.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your letting me be here.
So to start off our author talk, we're going to ask, why did you decide to write this book in 2003? And this is your 3rd edition, so kind of what a little bit of the change there that's gone on.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so this is kind of the history of me working in parent services, I guess. When I started working with parents, it was in the early 1990s. And at that point, the message that was always given to parents was a very clear, it's time to let go. And the message would be, your student is 18 years old now, they're adults, they're responsible, and we at the college are here to take care of them. So don't worry about it, just let go. And at that point in the early 1990s, most parents took that message very, very well. They were fine with it. About 1995, however, I started noticing I would go to parent orientation sessions and that message would be delivered. And parents just didn't take it the same. They would sort of sit back in their chair and they would cross their arms and they'd kind of squint as they looked at you like, I'm not sure I quite like this message. And by the year 2000, they were not taking it at all well. And they didn't just sit back in their chair. They said, look, my kid was 17 years old last week. I haven't seen him turn into an adult this week. Don't tell me when to let go. I know my kid best, and I will watch my kid, and as he shows me that he's more mature, I will start letting go. But it's not an automatic overnight thing. Well, I would go home from these orientation sessions, and I would complain to my husband that somebody needed to write a book about parents. Now, there was a book out there from I think it was 88 when it was published, and the title was Letting Go. And it, like I said, it was a perfectly good message for a long time, but didn't work anymore. And my poor husband, I guess, finally got tired of hearing me complain about this. On my birthday, I think it was the year 2002, or 2001, I guess, he gave me an envelope for my birthday, and I opened it up, and inside was a receipt showing that I was registered for a class on how to write a book proposal. And he had written on it, you think someone should write a book for college parents? Let it be you. Now, I am kind of tight with money, and I didn't see that I was going to be able to get a refund on this. So I went to the class. It's about a 6-week class. And I followed the instructions, and I'm a very good student. By the end of 6 months, I had a literary agent and a contract and 12 months to write a book. So for the next whole year, every weekend, I would sit in my little office at home and work on this book. So like I said, it did come out in 2003. Over time, as I've worked with parents, it has seemed to me very much like about every 5 years, things change dramatically. Something happens, things change very dramatically. And that has been the case in the way that parent-college relationships have developed. They've changed over time. Parents have changed over time. Students have. And after about 5-6 years, I started noticing that the original edition really needed to be updated. Technology had changed significantly. The smartphones really weren't popular until 2007. Parents did not text even in 2008 when we surveyed parents. They said, yeah, that's for kids. Facebook was just becoming popular outside of college and university students. Most parents did not yet have it. So a second edition seemed like a good idea, and the publisher jumped on it. And then this time around, even more change. And the way that colleges and universities have worked with parents is dramatically different. So it seemed like a third time was necessary. Now, the second edition actually was in publication during the beginning of the Great Recession. So as I wrote it, things were changing significantly. And then this time around, I just got the book published in March. It was the pandemic hit, and it was in publication at that point. So I have decided this is the final one. I'm not doing it anymore. I'll turn it over to Laci or whoever else wants to write the next edition. So that's
well, thank you for that. That's a wonderful story. I've never heard that before, so that's wonderful. Why did you arrange the chapters the way you did? What was your thought process behind starting at the beginning of kind of the admissions process? A lot of our families are kind of through the book now. They're Georgia Tech students are in their 4th week of class, depending on what year they are, as far as first year and so on. So why organize the book that way?
Well, it kind of worked out that way in that, like I said, I had 12 months to write the book. And what I would do is come home every weekend and think about, okay, what were the big issues this week? And as it turned out, when I started, admission process was in full force. And then it went into the summer of change, and then it went into the transition into the year. So the big arrangement, there's sort of a big arrangement and a smaller arrangement. The big arrangement does work chronologically and ends with choosing a career and graduating and transitioning out of college. But there are also several chapters about the big issues, which would be things like social opportunities and involvement on campus and finances, health and wellness, and the career building. And within those chapters, it's kind of arranged chronologically from first year to 4th year. So that's sort of the way that it ended up being. It just made sense. And I don't know if I were working on it on a different calendar sort of configuration, if it would have come out differently, but it made sense from what I was seeing on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. And that's the way we work with families too. Those of us who work in parent offices and work with families, we usually start with them kind of in the admissions and kind of work our way through to commencement. So absolutely. Is there a section of the book that you wanted to read to us today that you kind of wanted to share with our families?
Yeah, and because you said it's the 4th week, right?
Yeah.
What I wanted to do is just read a couple of chapters, not very long at all, on homesickness, because that is something that may have already started or could be starting right now. So I'm just going to read a page here. At some point, nearly every freshman will suffer from homesickness. Feelings of homesickness often creep in during the 1st or 2nd week of school, but they're more confusing when they show up later. Parents don't always know that the emotions their child is expressing stem from homesickness. It sometimes sounds more like anger or disappointment. This place is just not what I expected. They never said the classes would be so hard. They may express their unhappiness not as missing the family, but maybe, I miss the dog, or I can't sleep here. I need my own bed. Children of single parents express their homesickness as a sense of responsibility. Are you okay, Mom? I should be there to help with the yard work. Besides, it would be cheaper if I lived at home. The intensity of homesickness can come as a surprise, especially when these same students have happily gone off to summer camps or extended school trips throughout their lives. Somehow college feels permanent, not just a temporary respite from home. Usually homesickness is short-lived. It's a response to being in a new situation without the support system they've always relied on. As students catch on that they can handle their new life, the anxiety will subside. In the meantime, parents help ease the loneliness by sending messages of encouragement. You might include your student in a weekly family activity, maybe a video call with the grandparents, or a chat while watching a favorite show. Most important, though, remind your student to get involved on campus. Suggest joining a student organization, getting some exercise, or sharing the box of treats you just shipped. Busy, engaged students don't have time to be homesick. And I think that's, generally that all applies. I think right now with the pandemic, it might be a whole different experience to be trying to get involved on campus. I know that student services people are working really hard using student development theory and practice as they design ways for students to be involved. Can you tell me, Laci, how is that working at Georgia Tech right now with all that's going on?
Absolutely. So we definitely we want our students to get involved. Absolutely. We want to follow that line of thinking as more they're involved. Dean Stein will say, the Dean of Students will say often, sometimes throughout the semester at some point they start referring to Georgia Tech as home, not as home as home. And sometimes our families are a little sad about that, but that's also a good thing that they feel at home here. But we have a student engagement office, that our Center for Student Engagement, that does civic engagement, community service, Greek life, our student organizations. So there's a variety of different ways, and all of them have virtual opportunities right now that they're offering. We actually just did a webinar last week about student engagement and getting involved. And so that's on our website if you're interested, under virtual recordings, for you to kind of look back and what that office recommended as far as getting involved. There's also intramurals that are happening, or they're calling them intramurals. There's also getting involved in the residence halls, student government. There's just a variety of different ways, and I'm hearing students already joining robotics club or connecting with friends in different ways. And of course, they're so good with technology, especially here at Georgia Tech. They're teaching me on a regular basis all new things.
I understand that. I think one of the challenges might be for students who are living at home and wanting to be involved. It's hard enough in a residence hall room, but you know that other people are doing it. But I think it's really important for students who are living at home to intentionally make time to do some of those online things and find ways that they can be involved. That's really important.
Absolutely, and we definitely have quite a large population of students this year who are at home, whether that's international or out of state, or even here locally as well. So that kind of leads into as you alluded to, the pandemic information is not in the book because you finished before all of this hit in March. How does some of your advice translate into today that you share in the book?
There are things that when I read it now, it's like, oh, that doesn't work this year. Some of the information about dealing with roommates or getting to know the people that live next door and things like that. I mean, it's just not the same situation. But the bulk of the information is still really good. Student development stages are what they are. There are things that young adults this age have to be learning. And the book does talk about a lot of those. And those include things like how to separate from the family while maintaining connection with the family. This is a time when students are supposed to be learning how to become independent. At the same time, they do need to maintain a connection with their family. This is a time when they are supposed to be identifying what their strengths are. You know, in high school, a lot of students don't realize how talented they are in some areas. It's like, well, everybody can draw, can't they? Or anybody could sing. There's nothing hard about that. But this is a time when they are supposed to be realizing, no, what I have is really kind of important and can be used in different ways. So what are my strengths and how can I use them proactively? This is a time when students are supposed to be looking at the values that they were raised with and kind of questioning them, trying to put them into the context of what they know inherently and what they're learning in classes and in dealing with other people. It's a time of brain development. This is the time when students really learn about decision making. And a lot of this, if they're not getting these steps right now, they're going to be behind perhaps for the rest of their lives. There's not a big window when they're supposed to learn these things. So things like, we know that college students take risks, and we hope that they are healthy risks. Learning how to predict consequences and avoid bad consequences and deal with academics and finances and learn all of these things about how to move themselves forward. And it's also a time when they are learning about how to take care of themselves related to health and safety. So that does kind of fit back within the conscript of the book. So.
Yeah. Doing laundry, how to cook, all those things. All those things. When they wash their clothes and stuff comes out pink, they figure out not to put the red stuff in with the white stuff. They'll figure it all out.
I remember one time walking across campus and there were two boys walking in front of me, and one of them turned to the other and said, you know, I washed my sweaters this week. Some of them got really little. And the other one said very gently, well, if they're wool, I don't think you're supposed to put them in the laundry.
Yes, we don't have a lot of wool sweaters in Atlanta, but I'm sure you definitely do there.
In Minnesota, yeah.
In Minnesota for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, we're learning all of the things right now. So we talked a little bit about advice for commuter students, if you will, or families at home remotely. I think I would add, and if there's more that you want to add to that, just reaching out to our office if you have questions and letting us see how we can best assist you. We actually are thinking about putting a webinar together for families whose students are at home and how to best assist them. So we're working on that right now to help those families who are not seeing their student necessarily leave the house. They're just there all the time and they're not really plugging in or getting connected. So we want to be able to help you. So we're working on a webinar for that. Did you have, I know you just talked about it, was there anything else you wanted to add to that as far as being at home?
Well, throughout the book, there is a lot of information for commuter parents of students who are living at home. And I don't know if we consider them commuters now because they don't get to come into campus, but at the same time, a lot of that information still applies. One of the big issues for commuter students or students living at home is that it just doesn't feel like they've gone to college. They're still sleeping in the same bed. They haven't physically moved and connected with a campus. And that's an important process of what these students need to be doing. They need to learn how to connect to a campus, to Georgia Tech, and to being a student. What I'm really concerned about is that when students live at home, and it just feels like everything is the same as it was last spring, and it's still not much fun, they don't necessarily build that into their brain that I am first and foremost a student. A lot of these students are going to be working part-time jobs. They've got family to deal with. In essence, they're putting three different worlds together. They're putting family, college, and work together. And right now, the most exciting thing they're doing might be their job, so they won't consider themselves a student first. And parents can help with that. There is something you can do to deliver the message that being a student is important and that you respect that, and that is their primary role right now. And that comes from everything from, the way their space is set up. You and I have a common friend, Jennifer Bell, who had two students move home last spring from different colleges. And she actually set up in their dining room college. And she had the logos of the two schools on the walls. And students, her son and her daughter, would come down to the dining room, and that's where they did their studying. That they could get away from school when they needed to go up to their room and play video games or watch a movie or something like that. The way that she set it up, I think, really made a difference just in helping the students make that transition, find a place for themselves to work, celebrate when they finished a test or when they did a big project or something like that. And it requires quiet hours in the house. It requires everybody who's there working during the day to come up with a schedule that's going to fit. She suggested recently that maybe if they had a whiteboard where they could put, I need to be online at this time for a Zoom meeting or something, that the rest of the family knew that they need to back off for a while and let them have that space. So to the extent that you can help them identify first as a student the importance of being a student, it's going to make a huge difference in their success and their retention and their ability to get back to a normal schedule on campus as soon as possible. I don't know, does that suggest anything else to you?
I think that's great. I think Georgia Tech students too are they're hardworking. They got into Georgia Tech for a reason. They're extremely smart. But we do have a lot of work here. We're hearing from students here on campus who are already overwhelmed by the asynchronous and the synchronous and all the things and the deadlines and how to manage it all. And so, keeping themselves organized at home is just as important as keeping themselves organized here. Perhaps letting you know, gosh, this is going to be a busy week for me. I've got 3 tests this week. So I really need to study and have some quiet time. And so families kind of are mindful that, why aren't they being more engaged? Why aren't they participating in movie night, family movie night, or whatever it is? It's not that they don't care about family movie night, but they really do want to do well academically at Tech. And so they're just very focused.
It's hard. It's just hard. It's a weird year.
If we can the word is grace. Give ourselves some grace. That would be good. So one of the questions that we get a lot is, what's the appropriate amount of family involvement, whether they're at home or they're here? How do I, and it's the title of your book. How are you there? As best you can, but letting them kind of do their own thing, but knowing, you're kind of there just to be supportive whenever they need you.
This is kind of from the book, but it's excerpted a bit. And what I like to tell parents is, certainly when your student is struggling, you want to help. You just do. It's natural, and I understand that, and it's what being a parent is all about. But it's important to ask yourself a few questions. When students have a problem, and you're going to be the first one to hear about it, that's always the case. There's a reason for that. When students have a problem, they're trying to figure out, is this really a problem? Is it my problem? Is it my fault? Do I have to do something about it? And then they're trying to figure out, how do I even talk about this? So they call their parents and they practice talking about it to you. They haven't had time to process it much. it seems really intense to them at the moment. If they gave themselves a little time, it would be okay. And they would think about, there are sources on campus, and I probably don't need to ask my parents to help with this. I don't even really want my parents' help with this. But you hear it at the worst possible stage. So when this happens, what I want you to do as parents is to ask yourself these following questions. And the first one is, can most students this age handle this kind of situation on their own? And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's the most important thing to consider. Can most students this age handle this kind of situation on their own? Would you expect your neighbor's kid to be able to cope with this? If most students can handle it, is there some reason why your student actually can't? If most students can cope with something like this, let your student take care of it. And then consider, will your student learn something by taking care of it himself or herself? Students do learn by working through problems. Plus, bonus, they can meet the people who help them now and in the future. So if they can learn something, it might be a little painful for them, but maybe it's worth that pain. Next, does your student actually want you involved? Like I said, when they call home with a problem, they're trying to figure out in their own heads what exactly happened. And finally, do you actually have the full story? Students usually present problems in ways that make themselves look best. Actually, we probably all do that sometimes. I think I could confess to that. Now, I'm not saying that they're lying. They're just like polishing the story. And for those of you who have students at home, would you even know about this if your student was at school? Would your student be handling it on their own if he or she was at school? And is it just because you're in the same space at this time that you know about it? Now, there are times, I mean, in a lot of cases, we do ask parents to let their students take care of it. Don't worry about it. But there are times when parents should be involved. And honestly, I think some of the saddest things that I've ever had to deal with in working with parents of college students is when parents would not be involved and would call later and say, you know, I didn't want to be a helicopter parent, but this is the situation. And they should have been involved. So there are some questions on that side of the story too. The first is, and this is a big one, is your student able to communicate? If there's a serious health issue, you may need to relay information to those who need to know. But if your student is capable of communicating, it's almost always best to let them do the talking. Does your student have physical or mental health issues that prevent making well-informed decisions? In those cases, yeah, you may need to be involved. You may be the best person to be involved. But if they don't have really good reasons why they can't handle it, generally it's best for them to. And finally, if you cannot locate your student, you certainly can ask the residence hall or, if appropriate, the police to do a wellness check. But that should not be a case of my student didn't respond to a phone message today and I don't know where he is, so somebody needs to find him. If you do need to step in, keep your involvement as minimal as possible and try to frame your questions around what does my student need to do on this, or not how can I fix it, or how can I make this all go away. Those are not reasons for you to be involved. Let your student do as much of the work as he or she can. This really is all about normal student development. It's what students are supposed to be doing and learning at this stage of their lives. So
I heard so many nuggets in there that were good. So many good nuggets.
Yeah, but I understand, you know, and I think especially this year when we're all on edge, it's going to be tough for families not to be as more involved than they maybe normally would. So Yeah,
Absolutely. So one of the things I want to share with parents too is I definitely am used to families telling me that they got that 2 a.m. call, which
yeah.
has whatever it is, roommate issue or broke up with somebody or class is overwhelming, and they call the families at midnight, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, because that's when they're up. That's when they're doing a lot of stuff, and you've been asleep probably for 2 or 3 hours at that point. And then the families are usually pacing around the kitchen, trying to figure out a solution, trying to navigate it, trying to figure it out. Well, your student goes back to sleep. Your student's like, got it off my chest. Good. I'm going to go to sleep. And so you're still up till like 6 o'clock in the morning, pacing around the kitchen, trying to figure out a solution, looking stuff up on a website. So this is exactly what Marge is talking about, which is kind of they're sharing that with you in the moment that it's occurring to them, but take the mentoring role from the title of her book and kind of think about, as a mentor, how can you help your student navigate that, for sure. And the helicopter piece that you talked about, we get families call our office too and say, I don't want to be a helicopter parent. But as our families at Georgia Tech, we don't like that term helicopter parent. We like our families to think about being a tandem bicycle family. And you are certainly on the bicycle. You're just on the back of the bicycle, because your student has to learn those lessons while they're here at college, at Georgia Tech. But they need you pedaling with them during challenging times and supporting them, especially during this challenging time this year, to be there to kind of prop them up and help them get along.
You know, my brother was a professor at a university. There was some weird feedback there. My brother was a professor at a university, and he always told me that the same thing, students calling in the middle of the night, happens to professors. And he calls it the midnight meltdown. And he said, from the time that office doors close in the late afternoon, as it gets darker and darker and darker through the night, students get crazier and crazier and crazier about, oh my God, I didn't do this right, or my professor doesn't know this about me. And he would come into the office the next morning and have these same messages that we always got, or that parents got. And he said, as it got closer to morning, eventually, you'd see them stop. And then by the time you saw them again, all was well. There was no problem. So yeah, pause is an important step in this process, I think.
Absolutely. Especially for our families, if this is your first one going off to college or your one and only going off
Yeah.
to college. Definitely, for sure. So I was going to ask one last question, and then we can wrap up with kind of some closing thoughts. But as we go through the rest of the semester, what challenges, so our students will be leaving after Thanksgiving. Well, they'll be leaving for Thanksgiving break.
Okay.
And taking finals online, or if the faculty member gives them something perhaps ahead of time, so they'll have a longer winter break than our students have ever had before. What challenges do you see kind of coming up that we would normally see in student development during that time?
Okay, well, to start now, I think the important piece is for students to be establishing routines. Now, we've kind of talked about this, but until they have a routine down, they're going to be uncomfortable. It's kind of natural when you're in a new position, new place or something, that you start to figure out, where's my favorite coffee shop? What time of day do I need to take a break? And if their students are not doing that yet, they need to. Parents should watch for those routines. If you see that they're making really good decisions, not a problem. But within the first 6 weeks, they should have figured out some professor that they like, some friends that they're talking about, something that makes sense of their days. And if you're not seeing that, then it may be time to kind of intervene and say, okay, what kind of choices are you making? What are you doing in terms of, sleeping enough and eating well and doing your homework regularly and things like that? Establishing those routines is really important. Making time, like we said earlier, for not only the academics, but also social activities, and campus involvement activities. You want them to be feeling like they are part of this school. They are Georgia Tech. And that comes from those involvement sorts of opportunities. They're going to be struggling with things like midterms and the first grades that they get. They might be really disappointed. This is a time for adjustment. It's not the end of the road by any means, although a lot of students sort of feel that way initially. Back at home, I think there are usually some things going on with families at this time. We find that parents, partners tend to have completely opposite feelings about a student leaving home. And one of you is likely to be saying, this is great, we're going to change everything, let's move the big TV into the bedroom, let's redo the family room as a gym. And the other one is saying, hold it, just stop. We've got enough things going on right now, we don't need to mess with everything else. The harder one of you pushes, the harder the other one is going to push back. And it is about adjustment. It takes time. Everybody adjusts at slightly different stages and times. Be kind to each other. Just be patient, and you will eventually get to the point where you both are ready to move ahead at a decent pace. Among younger students still at home, if you've got younger children, there's likely to be a big adjustment going on there right about now too. For some students, they have suddenly become the center of the family's attention. Now, for the last couple of years, you've probably really done a lot of focusing on getting Georgia Tech child into school. So you have spent a lot of time with them. Your interests have been kind of dedicated along that target. Now, all of a sudden, that kid is in school, and your focus is all on the younger child. I had one student worker one time, a boy. He was actually one of triplets, and he had an older brother, and then there were the three triplets. And his two other triplets went to school about 3 weeks before he did. And he said that whole 3 weeks before he got away to school, he would go down to the dinner table, and his parents would sit down and they'd look at him. And they'd ask him every question in the world. So what did you do today? What are you doing tonight? What are you going to do tomorrow? What do you have planned for the weekend? And he said, it was just so intense. All this attention on me when I'm not used to that at all. As a triplet, I guess you wouldn't be. But he would finish eating as quickly as he could, and he'd go up to his room, and he said, I just remember sitting there on the edge of my bed saying, I have got to get out of here. Now, some students are really okay with all that attention. I also remember, I think it was the same year, there was a young woman who was like, yeah, my mom started paying all this attention to me. She was on Amazon every day buying me clothes and doing things for me, and she just couldn't do enough. It was great. I loved it. But be aware that your student is likely going through your younger child is likely going through some significant issues as you're dealing with all the rest of this too. And then that whole Thanksgiving, go home for Thanksgiving, and how many weeks are they going to be home? Do you remember?
Let's see, 4, 5, about 6 weeks.
Yeah. That's a lot. Thanksgiving is usually kind of a challenging time, but it's only 4 days. And then the time between Thanksgiving, they go back to school and then don't go home until finals are done. Gives them some extra growing up time, and you're going to have them for a long, long period when what they really want to do is get back to school. So it could be a challenging 6 weeks while they're trying to do all of their exams at home. Again, being in a household where maybe parents are working from home, younger kids are working from home. Patience is going to be important for everybody. A schedule is a good thing. To the extent that you can break people apart, that'll be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say is wow.
It's gonna,
It's
we're all learning together. Absolutely. So
yeah,
we've gotten some questions that actually have come in. So I wondered if you and I could probably answer some of these together, if you
absolutely.
don't mind. So one of our dads, Mark, actually has a suggestion. He's suggesting to help adapt plans, expectations for the short term and the long term during COVID. We are all dealing with this, but especially students. So I think I guess it's a question. How do you help adapt plans, expectations for the short term and the long term to help students? Um, and Mark is one of our very active dads. It's good to see you on here, Mark. I would say, knowing your son, he's probably got you on a schedule. You probably are trying to figure out how to organize things. But yeah, I guess just taking a cue from your student to figure out what they need, maybe sitting down, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Marge, but maybe sitting down with your student to see, how can I help you? What can I best do to help you navigate through this time? And where are areas that we could be helping as a family, or where do you need us to back off a little bit? Just having a real genuine conversation, maybe over dinner, or maybe making kind of a breezier conversation, just to see where they think they need the help, because they might not have even thought about it.
I think a good question there to ask is, well, if they come to you with a problem, what do you suggest, or what do you think we should do, or what will you do if it's, not something that the parents need to be involved with? How do you think you can handle that? But turning a lot of the responsibility back to the student where appropriate. I love the idea of thinking of things in short term versus long term. I think we all have a tendency to see everything as right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that we can push it back a little and say maybe if we work on this, or if we let it go for a few days, we'll come back to it and see how it works. I think that's really good. I like that.
Another question from a mom who asked, what do you do when you have a student who won't take the first step in joining an organization, even though there are great clubs? And the student has also, heard that message from alumni as well. So my son seems fine, but he's just not connecting. She said he thinks it's harder on her than it is on him during this time.
Normally we don't have normal right now, but when it's not pandemic time, different students are going to decide at different times, I need to get involved with something. And it's not at all unusual the first few weeks of school for students to, frankly, just be relieved that they're finally there. And just being there is as much as they can take in right now. At some point in normal years, a student will decide, I need to do something else. And I saw there's a activity fair going on, or my professor mentioned the chess club that he advises. Maybe I'll talk to him about that. So it may not be that right now is the time for the student. One thing that I think students tend to do when they're looking at how to get involved is they look distant. And in many cases, in the residence hall, if they're living in a residence hall, that's the best place to get started. There's residence hall staff that can help them find something that's appropriate. So just maybe mentioning to the student that they could check with, do you call them RAs, Laci?
Yeah, RAs,
okay.
Yes.
Maybe the RA, talk to the RA about getting involved. It doesn't seem as difficult, as challenging as figuring it all out yourself, but if they talk to the RA or somebody else close that is getting involved, it's just a little easier than setting out on their own. I don't know. Your thoughts, Laci?
That's actually how it's been several years, but that's actually how I got involved as a first generation college student, was to get involved in the hall council in my residence hall. And then that kind of expanded to other opportunities because I was learning from my peers about other things that were happening kind of on campus. So that one, even if your student just joins one organization, whatever it is, they will then hear about other things during that experience, which will lead them to other things. And we hear from our families all the time that sometimes our students get involved in things that the parents are like, I had no idea he even had any interest in that. Like, he's never expressed in all of his life. He had a desire to learn how to fly a plane, and now he's in your, plane club. So, parents are kind of always surprised, but that goes back to what you're talking about as far as them kind of discovering who they are and what their interests are.
These are good questions.
Yes. One says, what if your student keeps saying that everything is fine, but they won't go into details? So meaning, I think, communication. Like, the students are just like, it's all good, we're fine, we're good. I think our families sometimes want, how are classes? What's going on? Have you met anyone? Have you met anyone in the hall? It's fine, we're good, it's fine.
To a large extent, it's not a bad thing when your student is saying, hey, I got this, don't worry about it. But yes, you want to know a little bit more. Asking kind of open-ended questions tends to be the easiest. It's awfully easy for a student to, if you say, so was your day good? A yes or no answer is really easy to come up with. But maybe asking, so this class you're taking in psychology, what sorts of things do they talk about in there? Or rather than asking what did you do on the weekend, maybe ask, what are students doing on the weekends? How are they in their rooms? Your student will have some ideas of what other students are doing, and it's a way to get them talking about those possibilities for themselves, I guess. But keeping things open-ended and also respecting the fact that things are probably going okay for that kid.
We definitely have some students who seem to be adjusting, while there's, and this happens every year. For our new families, pandemic aside, this is a normal, as far as transition, there's always bumps in the road at the very beginning, whether we have the pandemic or not. It's not always smooth sailing. They don't always have the perfect roommate. They don't get all the classes that they registered for, that they're perfect. Their schedule's perfect. Everything's perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. And so the bumps along the road are challenges, but those are things that they're learning how to adapt and pivot. And Georgia Tech students are very linear in their thinking. They like to know the plan. They like to know how the box is constructed. And when things are not the way that they planned, or the box is a little wonky, it doesn't sit with them well, which then they will tell you or not tell you. But so part of this is just kind of our natural, typical time of the year. Go ahead.
That brings up one thing, is that students, when they start college, they have an image of what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be like, and it never is. And one of the obvious things to parents and to staff is that at some point students are going to get sick. Well, they never saw themselves as a college student who's sick, and it throws them completely. So having that care kit, if you haven't given them a care kit, do that. And don't be surprised that when something happens, it seems like a catastrophe, because this is not what they saw as college. It's hard to imagine that. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially now, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. How can we help a student make friends, especially with social distancing? It's not so easy to chat just with strangers. He is trying to make a lot of effort to connect. And then it says, are there physical clubs open currently? I'm guessing you mean in-person clubs. So a lot of our student organizations have been given the guidance to be doing things as virtual as much as possible right now. And that's because we're trying to keep our numbers of positive COVID cases down per safety guidelines and CDC guidelines. So students are able to connect virtually. The Campus Recreation Center is open, and I know you have to make a reservation to go and make an appointment to go and wear your mask, but students are definitely doing that, getting out, getting exercise and physical activity. Our green space, students are getting their lunches and their meals and sitting outside and outdoor seating and on the lawn. And so that's kind of making time, like maybe if you're passing somebody in the laundry room, like, hey, what's up? Kind of thing. The masks are definitely, face coverings are definitely, it's hard to see someone smile underneath a face covering, but it sounds like your student is trying to do what they can there.
And that's great. It's just not going to be the same this semester, and it's a disappointment. But to the extent that they can begin getting to know people virtually, that'll be something they can build on later.
So this, I'm trying to, there's several comments coming in, so I'm trying to keep up with them while I'm talking to you. How do we help students who are taking all their classes from California? How do we help them connect? And we've kind of already talked about that a little bit. I would encourage families, if you haven't gone to our website, parents.gotech.edu, go under the Stay Connected tab and click on virtual recordings. Last week's session, we did a whole webinar on student engagement. So if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to do that. There's also been some questions about concerns for mental health. We just did a webinar yesterday with the Counseling Center and the Care Center and Campus Recreation, and so a health and wellness. So I encourage you to go back and look at that webinar as well. That will be very helpful. We're doing all of these webinars weekly, 2 to 3 times a week until Thanksgiving, to make sure that you all have, it's a lot, but it's good. It's a lot. Tyler and I are very busy, but we want to make sure that you have the tools when you have time to sit down. We're recording all of them so that you can go back and watch them when you have time, maybe in the evening hours, or we know our international parents and out-of-state parents are on different time zones, so that you can learn as much as you can. So
and the mental health service, they can actually get mental health. They can have contact with counselors, right? Yes.
Yeah. Your students can make appointments with the care team, and they will triage them to meet with a counselor. So if that's some of your concerns, these are all great questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we're just not going to have time to answer all of these. If you have more questions, you can email our office at parents@gotech.edu. I want to thank Marjorie Savage today for joining us. This is wonderful and a wonderful time to sit and talk with you and listen to your words of wisdom. I'm personally, and she's going to laugh, I'm personally a huge fan. It's kind of like when you meet your celebrity. So Mark, you're my celebrity crush. So I'm super excited to sit and to meet with to meet with you. If you haven't purchased her book, again, I encourage you. It's on Amazon. I encourage you to check it out. And I don't know if you have any other closing thoughts, Marge, that you want to share.
Well, this has been fun. And Laci, I guess I hadn't realized I've probably known you for 11 years now, since you've been working with parents that long. And I have followed you from school to school. This is the third one, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you parents have an excellent resource in the Parent Families program and in Laci. You're very fortunate to have, and I cannot believe all the webinars you're doing. That's a new pandemic thing. So this is the way things will probably continue in the future. Maybe not to this extent, but I think we're all learning a lot, and webinar is something that we're learning about. So it's all
absolutely
good.
We're learning technology with the students because they know more than we do, especially here at Tech. Join us next week for a housing session at noon on Tuesday. I know lots of you tuned in to the town hall today with housing, and that's been quite a hot topic this week. So we invite you to join us next Tuesday. Again, the link is on our website. We'll post it again on Facebook. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and thank you, Marjorie Savage. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.